Hello and welcome to Just Onside. I hope you all had a good weekend. There's one man who obviously didn't have a great weekend. It's Ten Hag. We were going to talk about the Liverpool Arsenal game, but dramatic news. Me and Owen talked about it on Friday that Ten Hag he could be a dead man walking, and unfortunately they pulled the trigger. He's gone. That as a story. So, what's your thoughts on that? I mean, we talked about it, we expected it, but perhaps not as soon as it did come.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, you just very quickly. I mean, yeah, we spoke about it, didn't we? And we both said, I thought we summarized it, both of us, that it looked like it was just a matter of time, right? You remember Carragher spoke about it in the summer, saying they kind of fudged the issue. And we talked about how the FA Cup win, perhaps they lost their, I guess I want to say a bottle, but they lost their kind of conviction to make that call because of the FA Cup win and perhaps how that would be portrayed. I think most people, or at least I've been badgering home for the best part of a number of years, that ultimately it's the league and your performances in the league, not so much even the results, because the results will come over time if the performances are there, but the performances were spotty, right, all throughout. There was no real consistent sign of some development, some a way of playing because those that kind of training and improvement over time will forge themselves into positive results. So that's how it works. You go through the barren times to hopefully come through in years two, three, and four. But yeah, I mean, Eric Ten Hag, we spoke about it. You will get onto the game itself because I watched the whole game in its entirety, and it's always a shame when you're in a position as a manager where you feel each game could be your last. You're already on a bit of a downer, or it's your dead man walking. I think you phrased it perfectly. When it's like that, whenever you get into that set of circumstances, it's a matter of time because losing is part of football, unfortunately. Um, it's a game that I think if I could just comment on the game, I mean, they played incredibly well. First off, West Ham were pretty much up. I swear, I mean, defensively, it was about as poor as I've seen a team defend this year. United give them huge amounts of credit, performed really well, put some great opportunities together, and boy, oh boy, I mean, you've got to some of these chances. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the little one. I'm watching that live, thinking, I swear, I nearly switched the channel, thinking, right, okay, so that's 1-0. And I cannot believe for the life of me how he's missed. I mean, I know he's got to get his
He did the
foot.
hard part really well. The easy part, he fluffed it.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, the one element is the fact that the ball's bouncing, but of course, he had to nick it past the goalkeeper. To your point, he's done that perfectly. He's timed his run, got it past the keeper. I mean, it's bouncing, but are you? I mean, you're about 7 yards off at a slight angle. I mean, I don't care where the ball is. You should be putting that into an empty net. I think he's probably slightly confused himself with the fact that there was this last ditch challenge from a defender, probably in his eye line. But boy, I mean, you've got to score that. Yeah, I can't explain how big the nets is when you're that close in. It's huge. It's
Mm.
hard to miss, especially with no goalkeeper. But so as a manager under pressure, you need some of that Ayub to go your way, don't you? You need some of those chances. I mean, even Fernandez with the header from the cross, first time cross, you've got to get those on target. It was a great save from Fabianski in the first half from the free kick and the header. So you thought actually that they'll grind this out. I mean, if they create the same opportunities in the second half, you think United will see this one through, and Eric Ten Hag would still be in a job. I mean, second half, obviously, West Ham made some changes. Give Lopetegui some credit, but I mean, and the old Leeds faithful Somerville at the far post, and he had a great cameo, didn't he? He played really
Yeah.
well when he came on, full of beans. Great goal, a little bit fortunate with the assist for Danny Ings. But anyway, after that, you think, oh, it's going to be one of them days. Man United get themselves back into the game. Obviously, you saw West Ham defending in numbers way too deep. Get the equaliser, and you think, right, United are going to win now. They've got enough time. West Ham can't defend for Toffee. You think they're going to find a way. Now, I don't want to focus too much on the incident. You will probably get onto that shortly because I think that was the major incident of the
Mm.
entire weekend for me, especially when I watched it live as well. The enormity of the moment, Ayub, I think, was pretty apparent to everyone that it's the 90th minute, 91st minute. I think it was 7 minutes of injury time. I think it was 7 or 12. I can't remember. And you think at the time it felt a huge moment, and you thought this could be Ten Hag's job here, pretty much essentially. So we'll come on to the decision making, but look, they lost the game. I think many felt that this was going to happen because they lost, whether it was today, next week against Chelsea, whatever it was. You felt this was coming in the weeks that have gone by. I think it's poor planning from Man United. I really do. It didn't seem like Ten Hag was going to work out. this idea that you can give a manager a few months to, I mean, a few months, such a small sample size, you might have a little bit of bad luck, you might have a bad run of injuries. So I don't think anything's changed from the summer, is what my point is. If you're going to make the move, just do it in the summer. You'll have some people who criticize you for the fact that he's won you a trophy, but again, you've got to be strong in those moments. Um, I do feel for him in the sense of the fact that it came after West Ham, and again, we'll come on to the decision shortly with the penalty because I have some strong views. But I think overall, unfortunately, in a nutshell, Eric Ten Hag didn't show enough in terms of the amount that he'd spent, in terms of the patterns of play, in terms of the actual product on the football pitch, Ayub, to warrant him being given additional time. You may argue that there's a bit of culpability elsewhere, whether that's with the new board and what have you. But he's been given ample time to show some shoots of progress on the football pitch. And I think he has to take some responsibility for that. The fact that that's been absent, the fact that some key decisions have been made in the transfer market, and I'm talking incomings and outgoings, I think this was pretty inevitable. Now, whether this will be a good decision or a bad decision, I'm not so sure. Time will tell. But again, for me, Ayub, it felt pretty inevitable this was coming.
You're right. I mean, it's just a shame, really. I mean, I mean, I think he should have gone a long time ago, but it was just a shame. You talked about the game, and they were dominant. They should have been 2 or 3 up, and it would have been a different story. They played really well. I mean, it wasn't a case of West Ham were really, really poor, which they were, but I thought United were quite good. They played. It was slick football. It was. I won't quite go as far as saying it was the United of old, but it was very pleasing on the eye. Uh, and again, when they've gone a goal down, they have come back, but that decision, it's going to haunt Ten Hag for a long, long time because, in a sense, that was the decision which perhaps was terminal. Uh, Ultimately, he had to go. I mean, I think you talked about the cup final. It was difficult. I've got to be honest. After that game, if I was in charge of Manchester United, I would have found it almost impossible to dismiss the man. Prior to the game, it would have been something I would have been thinking about, but after the game, you just can't. It was such an immaculate performance, and it really showed a coach with such tactical acumen because what he did in that game made me convinced as well that maybe there's something there. So I can understand why he was kept on. It was a difficult one. It was one where I think Ratcliffe must have been thinking, I wish we'd have lost the game. But it was difficult. And so I fully understand why he was kept on. But then the problem was that maybe the real Ten Hag stepped up again, and that was a problem. As to where they go from here now, that is the question. Because they've been here before. They've got rid of managers before. I still maintain, and I've always maintained, that it's not just a manager. There is a rotten core of players there. I think they've bought woefully. I think some of the signings that they've made is shocking, and the money they've spent on those signings. So I don't know how you go about this because if you just get another manager in, the problems are still there. The players that 3 or 4 managers have failed to try and get this team out of a slumber are still there. That's the issue. It can't just be the manager. It has to be the players as well. I think this is where I've always said, I think what they needed was a cull, get rid of some players, get rid of some big names. Rashford as well. He's stagnated over the last 3 or 4 years. It's a very, very difficult job. It's still an attractive job. I think it's still a job that many managers will court. We can probably talk a little later as to who we consider to be suitable replacements. But it's a sad way for Ten Hag to go. I think it especially on a decision, because ultimately, if United draw that game, I'm not sure what the decision is. Maybe he would have had a stay of execution. I think that penalty and the
Probably.
goal that scored from the penalty was a killer blow.
Yeah, I think, look, what I would say just before, because I think I do want to dive into the decision a little bit, because I think it warrants conversation, because that one incident seems to have triggered a lot of debate on social media and what have you. Alan Shearer had his say, and I was following the kind of Sky Sports referee watch today. Dermot Gallagher had his thoughts as well, ex-referee. Look, Ten Hag ultimately a thoroughly decent bloke. I mean, at the end of the day, like you listen to the press conferences, you listen to the post-match interviews. Generally speaks well. Um, you don't mind, obviously, managers like that. I mean, what I mean, this it's at least important to have some likability, is what I would say. And I think for the most part, I think he stood up to the task. I think where the challenge came is, I mean, you look at his previous Ajax team, because that's what we fall back on. Ajax team in terms of attractive football, great young talent coming through. But again, that big run that they had in the Champions League obviously won the Dutch league as well multiple times. I mean, look, he's a top coach. And I think at the time when he was appointed, people thought, okay, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty decent appointment in terms of pedigree. But again, I think in the Premier League now, especially with, I was going to say foreign ownership, but different ownership structures, it's huge, big business, Ayub. And ultimately, I don't think if you're a big club, there's been a lot of talk over the last couple of weeks about Newcastle and the Saudi involvement and whether or not they're prioritizing Newcastle and the fact that they're having to stick within the PSR rules and all the rest of it. But when you're Manchester United and you've had a change of ownership, and Manchester United cost you a pretty penny as well from a Jim Ratcliffe perspective, you're going to expect a lot of scrutiny and a lot of perhaps you're going to be given a relative short leash, right? Because you're not their guy. You weren't there. They weren't. You were not their pick, let's say. So the fact that he got a stay of execution when a lot of changes were made around him, right? A lot of changes off the field with Jason Wilcox coming. They obviously got the gentleman from Newcastle as well, but a huge change in terms of the ownership structure and a lot of changes in the backroom staff. So there were changes. There was only one man who didn't change, and you felt that was only a matter of time, and that's proven to be the case today. So I think, look, ultimately, it was inevitable. The results were not good enough, but again, I always prioritize a little bit on the performances. Consistently, you want to see your team develop an identity where you say, "Oh, I can see what my team's doing." Like I can see that with my team. With Leeds, it might be more difficult, but I can see that with I can see that with my team. Yeah, even with a lot of changes as you saw recently. But you can see what your team's trying to do, where what the efforts there, what the applications there in terms of how they're trying to go about trying to get a result. Man United just didn't have that enough. They relied on individual brilliance, and you're right. They played some lovely slick stuff against West Ham, one touch, two touch. I mean, some of the chances. Think about to Garnacho early on,
Mm.
having those opportunities in that inside left channel. I mean, West Ham were cut to shreds on
Yeah.
so many occasions in that first half. You've got to put the game to bed, but clearly a team low in confidence in United. So I think it is the right change. I'd like to delve a little bit into the penalty incident, Ayub. I thought it was the biggest talking point of the weekend. I also think it wasn't just the incident. I think it actually shed a little bit of light, uh, and I guess a bit of a lens on overall VAR involvement, officiating, and what have you. A, what did you think of the decision itself? And B, were you comfortable with the process of the fact that VAR obviously has told the referee to go have a look, and then the referees ultimately changed his mind?
Not at all. I've watched it many, many times. My understanding is, especially at the start of the season, I think it was, unless there's a clear and obvious error by the referee on the field, VAR cannot overturn or cannot recommend that it's reviewed. There was absolutely no clear and obvious. I think even looking at it, it's it would be. I cannot see that as a penalty. I just cannot see that in any shape or form being considered a penalty. The fact that Michael Oliver decided that there must have been a clear and obvious error, that baffles me. Now, again, it's we've questioned this before, or we've talked about this before about egos and referees having egos. I don't know whether this is that situation where, for some reason, Michael Oliver has decided to involve himself in the game. He's whilst he's quite young in years, he's very experienced in terms of the profile. Now, I was reading somewhere, I was watching somewhere where it said that the problem is when you've got somebody who's senior, uh, it's difficult then to perhaps challenge somebody who is senior to you. So it may be that the referee on the field, once he's been asked to view the screen and the incident, he obviously knows it's Michael Oliver who's obviously done this. He perhaps feels that he does not want to overrule Michael Oliver because obviously Michael Oliver feels it's a penalty. Otherwise, he wouldn't have asked him to review the decision. So I just it's there's a number of issues that I have. For me, it was never clear and obvious. Therefore, a referral to VAR should never have been. But I don't know whether his ego has taken over, but it's just ridiculous. And I think the consequences of that has been dire. It's cost the manager his job. Now, albeit you can question whether he was going to go in the next few weeks anyway, but it doesn't really matter. That's by the by. This was a decision which had a significant impact on a manager, and I think it's outrageous. For me, never a penalty.
Yeah, I mean, look, Ayub, really well summarized. I concur 100%, Ayub. I mean, this decision yesterday got me so irritated beyond, like, I swear, football never moves me as much as it perhaps moved me yesterday. I remember the Spurs Liverpool incident last year. Obviously, we both were pretty upset about that in terms of the Luis Diaz goal.
Mm.
But the reason is exactly what you outlined, Ayub. I mean, maybe perhaps I'm a little bit more sensitive to it right now because of some of the incidents that have happened to Arsenal in recent times. And I try and be very open and honest and fair about some of the things that have happened. And I'm always of the view is, okay, cool. But let's just see now how some of these other incidents play out, right? You look at this incident, are you firstly, not saying that the minutes matter, but to some extent, there's always some degree of influence a little bit. You're thinking it's 1-1. It's the 90th, 91st minute, which means now any interference in any decision is pretty fatal. It's going to define it one way or another, especially like a key red card in the last maybe 10 minutes to go or a penalty at the end. These kind of or a tight offside decision, let's say. It's pretty critical when it gets to that moment of the game. For me, the fact of the matter is it's a very simple decision. Do I think De Ligt has made contact with Danny Ings? I do. I do think he's made contact with him. However, the ball is not in anybody's possession. It's bouncing around, right? In the penalty box, it's bouncing. So neither party's actually got control of the ball, so to speak. Now, you might say that doesn't really matter, but it does in some extent. We're not talking Danny Ings going through, running through, and De Ligt, has he touched him, has he not, he's fallen over. That's a slightly different dynamic to the ball bouncing around and some innocuous contact around the ankles, around the shins, okay? Now, do I think there was contact? Yes. Now, some might say, well, that makes it a penalty then, because if it's a foul, it's a foul. Even a small trip can be a foul. But it's a little coming together, and neither party, and you know what I'm going to say, was, I don't think, materially disadvantaged. I don't think Danny Ings was clearly getting a shot away. The ball was bouncing around, and there's a little bit of a coming together. The problem I've got now is, and you've got to be very careful in an adversarial sport where there's a lot of partisanship and what have you, where we think, oh, this happens to us, like this. I'm trying to be super fair here. Is you've got to ask yourself, look, is it really fair that game, a little coming together? It's a contact sport, are you? So there is going to be some contact. Not every contact is a foul. Not every contact is a penalty. So for me, Michael Oliver, as to your point, in terms of him actually getting involved and saying to the referee, here, have a look, for the life of me, I can't understand it. I really can't. The obvious decision was it's a bit of a coming together, but come on. He's not really impeded him. Is there a little bit of contact? Absolutely. But the ball's bouncing around. It's neither here nor there. And I always say, if it's neither here nor there, and you got to remember, the referee who's then had a look at the screen, he's had a look for multiple minutes. So it can't be clear and obvious if he's going back and forth, replay after replay after replay. And you could see the look on De Ligt's face. He was absolutely distraught in terms of the decision. And obviously then Jared Bowen does what he does and West Ham win. And to your point, it sealed Ten Hag's fate, as we saw today. It was an absolutely scandalous decision. And you mentioned about Michael Oliver's ego. There was an incident last year, you might remember. I remember watching it at the time and thinking, it's interesting how some of the justification from Howard Webb and some of the other seniors are coming about. I mean, he spoke about on the overlap, about referee's call. You mentioned at the start of the season, about trying to stick with the referee's call as much as possible to improve the decision making, all the rest of it. He spoke about this on the overlap 2 weeks ago. Referee's call there was a bit of a coming together, let's get on with it type of stuff. And to be fair, I think most people would be okay. I don't even think West Ham fans would be majorly aggrieved. So for him to, as a referee, to intervene, VAR to intervene, the same way for the Saliba red card, a decision was made with pretty clear view for the referee, but they've intervened, haven't they? They've said, oh, we think you've made a clear and obvious error. So they are intervening time and time again. So this justification that they're going to stick with the referee's call as much as possible seems neither here nor there. I think it's absolutely wrong justification. It's absolutely wrong. I think they're just putting that line out there. There was an incident last year, just very quickly, Michael Oliver. It was the game between Liverpool and Manchester United that finished 0-0. It was played in December last year because I remember I was in Dubai at the time. And if you remember, Diogo Dalot around the 90th minute got sent off. And he got sent off by Michael Oliver. The game was at Anfield. And he got sent off for 2 yellow cards straight away. So basically what happened was he challenged for the ball or something like this. And it was clearly a throw in to United. Michael Oliver got it wrong. There was a little bit of frustration from Diogo Dalot. But anyway, the point is he gets two yellow cards just for the fact of showing multiple dissent type of thing. Now again, as a senior referee, which he is, he's regarded as a senior official. I always looked back at that moment. I thought, he's got the decision wrong. So Diogo Dalot was right to be frustrated. But he could have had the common sense and the wherewithal to say, look, it's Anfield. It's the two largest clubs in English football. There's a little bit of, there's tension in the air. There's a lot of pressure. Let's just calm it down. Just settle down. I've given you a yellow. Let's just be careful about it. So he could have managed that situation. But time and time again, what I'm seeing with Michael Oliver is he is intervening when a little bit of common sense, I come back to the Trossard incident, a little bit of common sense would have been, listen, just be careful now, and what have you. So there is a little bit with Michael Oliver there. I agree with you in terms of the dynamic. It puts the referee in a very unenviable position. I don't understand for the life of me if they're being sent to the screen, which is an obvious, clear definition of we think there's a clear and obvious error here. The moment you're sent to the screen, that's what you're ultimately implying to the referee on the field. I really do feel sorry for the referee on the field because he then 99.9% of the time changes his decision, right? But why is it that he then has to bear the brunt of 60,000 in the crowd, the managers, the players, and all the rest of it? If Michael Oliver or any VAR official thinks you've made a mistake here, I think the right decision is to make a penalty. The referee should just simply not have to go to the screen and face that walk of, that walk between the two dugouts and swearing and fans abuse and all the rest of it, and then have to come to the decision because he's scared of going against a senior official. It would be more, let's say, it would be better in that sense if you just make the decision and say, yeah, VAR official said it's a penalty, I'm giving it. So you can just say, look, it wasn't up to me. Somebody's corrected me. I don't like this idea of putting the on-field referee on the spot, so he then has to take all the flack from 60,000 or whoever it is. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. You're right, he could have been a bit more strong and said, I've seen the incident. No, I'm sorry, I'm going to stick with my original decision. But to your point, that dynamic of senior officials, is that playing some sort of part? I think United fans can count themselves really, really unlucky. I mean, a draw would have been a fair result because West Ham were atrocious in the first half and they were a little bit better in the second half. Fine, if you want to count a draw, so be it. But I think when you're intervening in moments like that, Ayub, I'd like the referee to be 100% sure. I don't think Michael Oliver should have intervened. And the referee, the fact that he took a long time to make his decision tells me he wasn't sure either. And when it's like that, Ayub, you take the goal. One little incident that happened Arsenal Liverpool game, I don't know what your thoughts were. When I saw the offside for the Marino goal, you saw the feet, just very quick. I know we're going to go to Arsenal Liverpool, but I'm sure you have the same opinion, Ayub. You saw the lining, you saw Van Dijk's foot, you saw Marino's foot. I didn't then need to see the lines to say that goal should just be given because your eyes said to you, it's pretty level. So you know what? I'd always err on the side of a goal. I would never want a goal to be disallowed for stuff like that. And it's the same when it comes to those type of penalties. You've got to be so doubly sure that is this clearly a disadvantage to the offending player or the attacking player. And it wasn't. It was a coming together, a little bit of legs. I don't mind about the handball Danny Ings committed because I think that was slightly after the impediment anyway. So I don't think the handball's a moot point for me. But it's a coming together. Michael Oliver's got to be so careful about intervening. I am absolutely convinced that Howard Webb in a few weeks, when he'll be standing with Michael Owen once more, whatever it is, will be telling you that this was the wrong decision.
Well put. I mean, I'm not sure what Howard Webb will say and what justification it was. And you're right, though. I think the referee on the field, he was fighting himself because he knew that he'd made the right decision, and I think it took time. Purely, I think he was trying to process it in his mind. My experience, my gut tells me it's not a penalty, but Michael Oliver obviously thinks it is, and I think that's why it took a long time. I don't think it was
Yes,
he was trying to look for a reason. It was just, I think he was
I,
taking time
I,
to
I,
sort of be certain, right?
yeah,
What
yeah, I
decision
fully
do I
agree with
make?
you. Yeah, I fully agree with you because the incident didn't
Yeah.
have multiple layers to it. To your point, it was either
Mm.
is there a clip or is there isn't? It wasn't as though, oh, let me check for a bit of this. Oh, let me see this angle. Oh, let me see that angle. You're absolutely right, you. I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think that's definitely him just processing what I'm about to give. Am I sure? Is this what I want to? It's that kind of probably thinking it's
Well, yeah,
Michael Oliver. So I'm fully in agreement with you there.
yeah. And he's bottom line, I think he's decided that right, he doesn't want to upset Michael Oliver. For his career, it's probably the best decision. in terms of just going with Michael Oliver, but I think it's ridiculous, and I think there has to be consequences on the officials because it's obviously had dramatic on Ten Hag. So it's a sorry way for him to sorry way for Ten Hag to lose his job. But it is what it is. It is what it is. We move on. Right. So that's oh, just before we sort of go on to the Liverpool Arsenal game, who do you think? I mean, just in terms of the names out there, I mean, I've tried to look at social media to sort of see what names have been bandied about. Potter has is sort of his name's been mentioned. Zidane has been mentioned. Xavi's been mentioned as well. I don't know. It's this is probably the most important. I mean, we've said this before with Man United, but this is probably one of the most important appointments they will make. So they have to get it right. So, is there anybody that you think is would be your choice? At the moment, obviously, it's Ruud van Nistelrooy. Not sure he's a long-term choice, but who do you consider to be perhaps an appropriate choice for Man United in the situation they're in now?
It's a very good question. I think two quick points on that. Firstly, whoever it is will not be a guarantee of success, will not be a guarantee of failure. That's the first thing. So I don't care who they appoint, unless it's Pep Guardiola. I won't be changing my mind on that. So that's the first thing. So I don't think it's a case of getting incredibly happy or incredibly kind of disgruntled, depending on who the appointment is. I'm not sure, in terms of who I think would be the best appointment. I wouldn't mind if you're asking me deep down, I think I do like the idea of Thomas Frank. And the only reason is I do like the idea of the fact that he knows the league, he knows the English Premier League, speaks very well, uh, pretty much a darling of the media, which I think is important because I think it's going to come with such a high level of scrutiny that being affable and and I don't mean too cozy. What I mean is like he comes across well in press conferences. So I think that is important when you're going to need a little bit of patience and you're going to need a little bit of support. But I think just in terms of what he's done with Brentford, the fact that they've never really had to battle for relegation, they've been pretty solid since they've come up. I mean, if you remember, you'll know better than anyone because you know the championship very well, unfortunately. But
That's
Brent,
two digs you've had now.
that's too. But you'll remember. I mean, tell me if I'm mistaken. But when they came up, you remember. I mean, they had Ollie Watkins, and that their forward line was absolutely
Yeah,
fiery.
yeah, yeah.
And they came up, and if you think about it in terms of the style of football, even now they've lost Tony, but they still, I mean, they've got an amazing win over the weekend in a lot of dramas, kind of drama packed Saturday actually, in the football coming back to beat Ipswich. But they've always done well. They've punched above their weight. They play some good stuff. He's got very clear ideas about formations and styles and all the rest of it. He's also got players who are probably decent but playing incredibly well. I mean, you look at Johan Wieser. He's done so well in the Premier League. You'd never think, in terms of looking at him, in terms of build, you're thinking, what striker? There's nothing to him, but he's constantly scoring goals. And Burmo's come up trumps year in, year out for Brentford. I mean, he's been a great servant in the last couple of years in terms of big time contributions. But the football that they play, and again, they don't really spend a lot of youth. Again, they've lost their best players. So for me, in terms of just tactical awareness, style of football, overall personality, experience in the league, I think Thomas Frank would be as a decent appointment as I think you're going to get from a Man United perspective. So, from my perspective, I'd like to see him being given the gig. I think if they approached him, they'd get him as well. Yeah.
Oh, they certainly get him. I think if they approached him, I don't think they will, and I personally wouldn't encourage Man United to go down that route. I think he's an exceptional coach, but there are some coaches who are designed for clubs of Brentford's ilk. I think Man United is a different animal. There's a lot of problems, so it probably needs somebody that uh, is able to cope with the expectation. I just don't think. I think if Thomas Frank came, he'd be so delighted he's got the gig. He'd almost sort of feel like a kid in a candy shop for at least the start. And you want somebody to sort the club out. Uh, that is where the problem is because whoever comes in, he has to be confident in his own ability. He has to be confident and not all scale and the size of this club and the expectations. And I think this is where it just needs to be maybe give Van Nistelrooy a few weeks just to sort of keep it ticking along. I mean, we talked about it almost right the year off. I think this is perhaps the opportunity for United to say, right, okay, we're we're going to have a reset. Van Nistelrooy, you're going to coach for the rest of the season. Uh, as long as we're not in a relegation battle, that may change the mind. But this
I'm
season
just
is,
I'm imagining come April, Man United 2 points adrift. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? We'll be doing podcasts every day. You.
yeah. So I'd almost sort of, if I was Ratcliffe, I'd almost sort of say, right, okay, this is the opportunity now. Let's write this season off. In a sense, it's a write-off anyway. So it's going to be difficult to really do anything from this stage. So uh, because you never know. Come the end of the season, there could be managers. Obviously, there will be managers, many more managers available. But I think what they need to do is identify what it is that they need, what it is that they are going to do. I'm talking about player calls as well, because I think they have to now talk about, right, in terms of personnel, who do we want to keep? Who do we want to get rid of? So I would do all of this in this year. So but by the time the end of the season comes, you've identified who you're going to get rid of. You've probably identified players that you want to bring in. And then obviously you can then choose a manager and explain to him, right, this is what we are going to do. At the moment, what do you explain to a manager if he's coming in? You've no idea. You've got uh, players who are surplus to requirements. You've got expensive players who are not performing. So it's for an incumbent. What do you do? You're almost just thinking, well, look, where do I start? Maybe the club needs to reset. So when the manager comes in, his job is to coach the players that are left. He's got a clear idea of what the vision and strategy is. At the moment, there is no idea, no strategy. And it's what I said on Friday. It's a club in flux going absolutely nowhere.
I think the only thing I would disagree with, it's not disagree. I think the reason why I like Thomas Frank out of everyone is I just think to myself, A, there's not a standout candidate that I think would translate to solving Man United's issues as well as maybe a Thomas Frank could. And what I mean by that is I think that particular club is so unique in terms of its history, in terms of what's happening right now. And nobody's had as good a kind of a view on that as someone who's been managing in the Premier League over the last few years. And I think Thomas Frank, what I like, I mean, I don't think he would be a kid in a candy shop to what you said. I know you said in jest, but I think he is somebody of substance. He does, I think, have confidence in his approach. I know what you're saying. Maybe he's okay with a club like Brentford where the expectation is not to win the title. It's pretty much still to stay up. And if they can establish themselves mid-table, that's a big win for Brentford for the next 3-4 years. I mean, no issues. Staying in the Premier League is still numero uno at Brentford. But I think from a United perspective, I think he's steady. I think he's going to be great with stakeholders, and that's important at a club at Manchester United. I'm talking about ownership. I'm talking about the board. I'm talking about you've got to get somebody who's going to understand what needs to be done. And if you get a Xavi, he's still a novice coach. I mean, Barcelona is because he's obviously got a great affinity and a living legend for that club. But he understands Catalan, he understands Barcelona, what it's about, what that club's about. So there's a different connection. You bring him now here, it's a new way of, it's a new league. He never played in this league, he's never managed in this league. It's not as if he spends a lot of his time in this league. Of course, I'm not saying he doesn't know his football. Of course, he does a million times more than you and I. But he's still coming to get used to the club, the way of working. Just in terms of what Manchester, I'm not sure he's got the experience to deal with what will be a challenging year or two. Let's be very clear. You spoke also about the player call. I'm with you. The only challenge I would say is Man United historically have not been good at selling players, and that's because normally they're on pretty good money, which is some of the contracts that Man United have dished out over time. So they've not been great sellers, I would say, and it's often because again the salaries being issued to some of these players are just too difficult to then get them off their books. You're right. I would write off this season. I would be okay with them writing off next season if they can start to see some growth, some kind of shoots of progress and what have you. And again, we spoke about it last podcast, that you just to close this quickly, is that you look at some of the other clubs, you can see Chelsea slowly forming something. Yes, Newcastle had a bad result against Chelsea, but Villa, fine, they were pegged back, but they're a credible outfit now. And obviously, you've got the big three. So you look at all of that, Brighton are a credible team. I mean, these teams are not going anywhere, are they? They've got good coaches, good established ways. I mean, if you look at City, Liverpool, Liverpool are well established because of all the hard work here, and Klopp's and Slot's doing a great job. Arteta's been there for a while. Guardiola's been there for a while. Chelsea are now slowly starting to see some progress. They've arguably got the best player in the Premier League right now. So you've got a lot of, I want to say stability. I want to say Chelsea are stable, but you see sides ahead of them, way ahead of them right now. So it's a long way back, and I would prefer to give that to somebody who's going to know how to go about steering Man United perhaps back to challenging for trophies. And I think Thomas Frank could provide that.
It will be interesting to see who they choose. We'd love to hear what you think, especially the Man United fans. Who do you want to be the next coach, and who's a realistic expectation? Right, enough about a team that's in the doldrums. We'll talk about two teams who are at the top of their game. It was a cracking game, Liverpool Arsenal. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed it. But I want to hear your take as an Arsenal fan. What was your take on that game? Very close game, and it could have gone either way.
It could have gone either way. First and foremost, incredible game. You're right. We text one another after the game, didn't we? And yeah, I just thought it was competition at its finest. That's how I put it. And competition at its finest doesn't always mean high quality players, goals, all the rest of it. I'm talking about where you sense the anxiety in the game.
Mm.
You sense that this could be a big moment. This could be a big 10 minutes. This could be a big 15 minutes here. And you felt that throughout the game, the ebbs,
Mm.
the flows, the challenges that Arsenal had in terms of having to rejig that back line. You felt at one point Arteta was going to have to get changed and get out there and start running around. But all these subplots and stories and two teams that for the most part, don't want to take a backward step. Yes, Arsenal will probably had to defend a lot in that second half, but it's not their natural, I don't think, MO. I know Jamie Carragher had some fairly observant views about what Arteta's perhaps morphing into in terms of a Mourinho type manager as opposed to, let's say, Guardiola. He didn't mean any criticism by it by any stretch, in terms of he's just talking about how Arsenal set up. I thought it was an incredible game, huge drama. Just to kind of break down the game, I thought first 20 minutes, I thought it was a pretty even game. I thought Liverpool were fine up until the Saka goal. And then obviously they've got them. So Saka, I mean, we spoke about this. I mean,
Mm.
quality is quality. You saw that from both wingers, Liverpool's and Arsenal's on that side. Saka, I mean, if he's not there at Salah's feet in terms of that vying for that spot of the best right winger in the league, arguably in Europe, he's definitely kind of getting to that level in terms of consistency of producing big moments. And yes, there's some argument Robertson should do better, but that's what the good players make you do. They make you indecisive. They make you unsure of your positioning, what you should do, and all the rest of it. So, incredible goal. Look, good goal from Liverpool. Arsenal would be a little bit disappointed set piece, but after that time, Arsenal suddenly came on really strong. I thought they dominated for about 25
Mm.
minutes up until half time, and I thought they were well worth the additional goal. Again, a lot of back and forth about the lines. Again, when I saw the feet, I don't know about you, I just thought you give a goal. It's close enough. You give a goal. So I was kind of pleased that that was given from an Arsenal perspective. And I think second half, ultimately, you obviously hope from an Arsenal perspective, you thought you're going to need a third. It just is the way the game's going. You're going to need a third. And the more and more you're going to give Liverpool huge amounts of credit. They fought their way back into the game. They didn't create a whole bunch. I mean, there was one moment from, I think, Curtis Jones with a block from Ben White, who I thought was very, very good at centre back. Yesterday, did not let Arsenal down in the slightest. I thought he might struggle a little bit because there's more ownership in the middle of the park as opposed
Mm.
to, let's say, playing on the right. But I thought he defended admirably. So huge credit to him. But you felt as the second half wore on and Arsenal were pretty much in retreat and kind of quite submissive in terms of defending, that you felt that maybe Liverpool would produce that one moment. And just before I get on to the goal, I think, look, there was a little bit of talk after the game about Arsenal and their mentality, not least from Roy Keane. Again, I was quite disappointed to see the comments. I don't think it's a case of Arsenal, and I say this respectfully, I don't think they intentionally are suddenly 2-1 up and thinking, oh, let's just hold on to see what we can do. I think that's a narrative that's been peddled, but I think it's more nuanced than that, Ayub. I really do. I think it's a case of a team that's been not in great form, so confidence is a little bit fragile. But I think that's sport. I mean, that's sport. That's what sport is about. When you're flying high, you're full of beans. When you've got a few shaky results, you're a little bit unsure of yourself. So I don't think that's anything new. But I think given that they were missing so many key personnel as the game developed, by the end, they've not got any of their first choice defense, at least in their positions. Um, I think it's just a natural thing that happens. You've got Odegaard missing, Saka's giving you as good a 70, 75 minutes as he can give you. You then become a very, I wouldn't say an average team, but you become a below par team compared to what Liverpool were, compared to what Arsenal are. So I think it just naturally happens that you end up retreating a bit more. You end up trying to protect what you have. Also, let's not forget the enormity of the game. Huge pressure on Arsenal coming into the game. A lot of talk about a defeat would somehow rule them out of the Premier League title. So there's a little bit of mental pressure of, hey, let's just try and hold on if we can. So I didn't have too much of an issue with Arsenal going about it. You've also got to give Liverpool credit. They weren't playing Everton, or they weren't playing like a team at the bottom of the table. They were playing the team that's top of the Premier League, which is why I find some of the criticism a bit. I'm like, they were playing Liverpool. I mean, let's give Liverpool some credit. I mean, as for the goal, incredible quality from all three players. I think the one thing I would say from an Arsenal perspective, and you saw it throughout the game, or you just very quickly, Martinelli didn't get a lot of change out of Kanate. One thing I think he will have to learn over time is you've got to be careful about the situations you lose the ball in. You're at your most vulnerable during transitions, and Liverpool is as good a transition team as you're going to get. He tried to take Konate out on the outside. Konate tackled him. And it was a time when Lewis Skelly was also pushing on. So the team was like progressing forward. If you remember, just before that, the way the ball came to Skelly and Martinelli was Saka holding off multiple players on the far side, as he often does. I think he's the best in the league at protecting the ball. I really do. Him and Salah are incredible. But he pings the ball out to Lewis Skelly. Lewis Skelly pings it to Martinelli. Now the team's kind of pushing forward as you do. He loses the ball in a very 50-50 type way, but you've got players then committed. All of a sudden, Liverpool, 1-2-3 pass, and Arsenal's backline's fully disorganized. So I think that's something he's going to have to learn, that when you lose the ball, there's places that you can lose the ball in, there's some places that you can't. Alexander Arnold, as the ball's coming, he had a pretty average game by his standards in
Mm.
terms of ball striking, but this is what the best players do. You give him enough chances. He produced that one cross in the first half for the McAllister header, which Raya saved. And this time, as the ball's coming across him, to hit it first time, that's the key thing. It's the first time nature to hook it beyond QBO, and I think it was Lewis Skelly at the time, but just the angles, the pace, the spin, it's as good as it gets. It really is. Salah's read the situation superbly well. That's the other thing. He could have run in a different direction. He kind of overlaps and crosses with Nunes. Nunes makes a great decision. It looks an easy pass. People might think that's an easy pass. I thought the Arsenal defender positioned himself pretty decent, actually, just try and cover both bases. But his pace on the pass was absolutely spot on. Salah didn't have to break stride, nothing at all. So there's a lot of nice things that Liverpool actually did. Of course, I don't think it helped that you didn't have a Gabriel there, that you didn't have a Timber there. So their whole left side Arsenal's was changed. And Timber, I thought, did a great job on Salah, by the way, for the first 60,
Mm.
65, 70 minutes. But they ran out of legs. I mean, Gabriel's got an injury where Timber just looked like he didn't have any more to give. So I thought it was an incredible game. I think a draw is probably fair in the end. I think both managers can be relatively pleased given the narrative that Arsenal came in. I think Liverpool haven't had a great record. They've not scored in the last 15 minutes of games. They've obviously put that one to bed. They still remain unbeaten away from home. And they're still right there, although City have taken top spot. So an incredible game, very watchable game, full of anxiety, full of stress if you're supporters of one of the two clubs involved. But my overriding feeling was this was Premier League football. This is competition. This is what it's about. And it's great to be up there at the top of the table fighting for these kind of points.
Agree. Beautifully summarized. You knew there was two heavyweights in a competition, and you're absolutely right about the Salah goal. It was perfect. It absolutely was perfect, and I love the movement between sort of when Nunes is running onto the ball, the way that Salah sort of glides into the box. Beautifully weighted pass, great finish, just lovely, lovely goal. I was very impressed by the Arsenal, considering they were a much weakened side, especially when Gabriel went off as well. They're a, they're they're not a likable side, but I mean that in a positive way because they they irritate you, they annoy you, they are becoming masters of the dark arts, especially when they're leading. They'll spend a little bit more time on the ground, especially David Raya. Uh, they'll sort of feign injuries a little bit more, and I don't mind that. Don't mind that. It's not something that I would advocate, but I have no issues with clubs doing that. In terms of the way that they're organized, I do not think there is a better team in the Premier League who is well organized, well drilled than the Arsenal. And they are a difficult side to break down. I'm just imagining if you had the full strength, they would have won the game with relative ease because I thought that draw was a fair result. But if I had to sort of say which team shaded it, I'd probably say it was the Arsenal. Maybe towards the end of the game when obviously Gabriel's gone off as well, a couple of players, their legs have gone. It sort of gave an opportunity for Liverpool to perhaps sort of be on the front foot a little bit more. But in terms of overall, I thought Saka was magnificent. He really was. He was outstanding. He had Robertson on toast. I think Robertson is a shadow of the player that he was, and it's. I think they should have just doubled up because he was totally incapable of managing Saka. Uh, but I just love the way that when I was watching it, especially in the first half, it just it looked as if they had an extra player. Arsenal. They always seem to have an extra player. It almost seemed as if it was difficult for Liverpool to really break them down, and that's the organisational skills of Arteta. I think he's fantastic. It then does beg the question that it's not the most pleasing to watch. Now, what I'm looking forward to is when Odegaard comes back, because I think you're right. They play attractive football. Arsenal, uh, when they've got everybody available and fit, they're on the front foot. I think last season they had quite a few good wins with lots of goals scored. So it's not a club like George Graham, 1-0 and that's it. But what I'm impressed, it's a begrudging admiration. I really do like the way that they set up because if you win against the Arsenal, especially if they've got 11 players, now that's always the problem with Arsenal, but if they've got 11 players, it's going to take some doing to get a result over the Arsenal. And I've got to say that they impressed me hugely. And in the end, I think it was a fair result. And I think probably Slot would be the happier of the two managers, especially if you're 2-1 down, to then score to score an equaliser. He'd probably be disappointed thinking we had about 10 minutes or so with a weakened back line. We probably perhaps should have pushed a little bit more, but in the end, I think a point at the Emirates is a good result against a very good side who was they were not at full strength as well. So I think all things good, all things good.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. And I look at some of the points you made about Arsenal and the dark arts and all the rest of it. Yeah, I see it. I mean, I see it clearly. I mean, some of them you have to take each situation on its own merits as opposed to just kind of over. Do I think Raya takes a long time with his crosses and the goal kicks and restarts? Absolutely, I do. I'm okay with the referees penalizing that. No, I've got no issues whatsoever. If you don't like a certain, let's say, offensive action by a team, I mean, there was some talk about Howard Webb about how they don't necessarily want to give indirect free kicks in that situation, but what they are trialing or trying out somewhere, or this idea is you give a corner to the opposing team. So if you take too long, instead of an indirect free kick from inside the box, you give the other team a corner. So I do like that. I feel like the punishment fits the crime a little bit more, and suddenly goalkeepers will start getting a move on
Yeah.
quickly enough. So I'm okay with them moving the game along. I've got no issues with that. I do agree with you to some extent, but I do think some of again, I'm always going to defend Arsenal where I see fit. And I do think some of this is out of necessity. I think they've had to bring players in off a couple of days training. They've missed some players. They've had to hurry back some players. If you remember against Manchester City, Ben White wasn't even supposed to come on, but he brought him on. He'd been ill all week. But Arteta confirmed that, look, I had no other choice. I had to bring him on. And he was game enough to give it a go. So he's had players where he's had to rush them back. So you're going to see Timber go down with essentially a dead leg. Gabriel's clearly was an injury. You saw his leg buckle a little bit from the push from Nunes. So that was, I mean, he's not somebody who's just going to quit on his team halfway through the game. So some of that is, I guess, out of necessity and all the rest of it in terms of trying to buy a little bit extra time and a few extra minutes and all the rest of it. But I thought it was just a great game, a great advert for the Premier League. Again, I do think some of the criticism about Arsenal and mentality is way overblown. I really do. I don't think Arsenal have, at least in my eyes, I think they've answered some of those questions for the last couple of years. They've had big games. Yes, they've not won the Premier League title, Ayub, but they've had to win some huge games to keep up pace with Man City. Last year, they took 4 points off Liverpool. They took 4 points off City. They've obviously already drawn with City this season and drawn with Liverpool. So it's not a case that they can't get up to speed with some of these big games. I just think given Odegaard missing, given Saka, I mean that was Saka on probably 50, 60% fitness, are you? And he ran rings around Liverpool for the first first off. Honestly, like in terms of some of the movements coming inside,
Mm.
running off the line, it was a player at the top of his game. You can tell if he gets back to 100% fitness, you get Odegaard back. I just feel from an Arsenal perspective, they've got two huge games in the league, Newcastle, Chelsea. I think both are away. They're probably gonna have to pick up 4 points from those games. It's gonna be hard. I mean, it's gonna be very hard. But I do believe that if they at the 19 game mark halfway through the season, if they're within five, around five, even six, but they've got a clean bill of health, I think they'll feel pretty strong that, right, let's go give this a right go. It's a very different way to how it's been over the last couple of years. Maybe perhaps this time they'll be chasing. But I think you probably all agreed that if they get a full clean bill of health and those two centre backs, the midfield's starting to shape up. Now you slot Marino in, Rice, who I thought was incredible yesterday,
Mm.
and Odegaard. You've suddenly got the makers of a combative midfield, but also a creative one. And then you've obviously got the front line who can still get some good stuff done. Again, huge credits Liverpool. I'm not sure why that wasn't considered as much as though Arsenal were playing some mid-table team. I mean, they were playing the
Mm.
team that's top of the table. Liverpool also showed, I thought, a great deal of kind of confidence, quiet confidence. I don't think they peppered Arsenal by any stretch. They had a lot of nice play in between the thirds, but ultimately moments of brilliance to get the equaliser and obviously a nice set piece routine to get the first equaliser. So I think Liverpool will be happy enough. I think Mikel Arteta, although he was quite bullish after the game, saying we probably deserve to win, I think deep down, given the narrative, given the set of circumstances, I think it's a game there was more to lose for them, let's say,
Mm.
than perhaps to gain. And I think a draw is something that you have to take given the circumstances. But again, overarching emotions, objectively speaking, a great game. Really good game to watch.
It was absolutely thoroughly enjoyable, and a real good advert for the Premier League. 'Cause I think what we saw was two sides with huge quality, but huge commitment as well. I don't think any of the teams wanted to lose, and it's just sort of final point on the Arsenal. I think that's what I really sort of appreciate with the Arsenal. There's a great deal of camaraderie. I think there was, I can't remember who the player was, but there was a player who was down, and must have been most of the players were around. Now, I've seen that before where a player goes down and there's about three or four players and then they start drifting away. They stayed there for quite a while, and it sort of it's a small, to a lot of people, insignificant thing, but for me it's quite important because you're always trying to look for camaraderie or togetherness, and it seems to be that way. They seem to really want to do it for each other, and I think the attitude is spot on. I do like the attitude. I mean, it's a strange one for me to say because it almost seems as if they've bottled it, but when I see the attitude and the eyes of the Arsenal players, it always looks as if there's a steal there. I think Arteta's doing a good job, even though I'm not impressed in one sense, but I am impressed because ultimately it's about trying to win games of football, whichever way you can. And he's obviously trying to find a way to navigate the fact that there's injuries. So he's trying to find a way of obviously trying to overcome that. So good stuff, good stuff. Right. So that I think should be a wrap.
Well, it
We've
should
had
it
a
should it should be a you, it should be. But come on, we've not indulged you. So let's indulge you. We spoke offline a couple of days ago about how Liverpool Leeds winning, continuing to winning, was giving you a little bit of respite from the challenges, the day-to-day challenges of work and all the rest of it. Came a little bit a cropper in terms of over the weekend. I think you were playing Saturday midday. I think
mid, yeah, yeah.
nil
And
nil. How did you play? Tell us.
it we should have won the game. I mean, it wasn't a great game. It was a quite a bore fest, but we were the better side. We had two or three very good opportunities. And again, it's that sort of Achilles heel. It's that sort of inability to score when really you've got the ascendancy, and we paid for it in the end because it's a league where, I mean, I got into my usual customary social media battles with fellow fans because they sort of feel that somehow I
Keep
expect
it
Leeds to
clean.
win
Keep
every.
it clean.
They somehow expect that I'm always saying that we should win every single game, but my point is that we have the most expensively assembled squad. We have the best squad, no question,
Are you? Are
in
you? Are
in
you?
the
Are you?
championship.
Just sorry. Just remind me again. How much did you sell Jorginho Ruta for?
40 million,
And how much did you sell Somerville for?
26 million,
And how much did you sell Archie Gray for?
40 million.
You're rolling in it, man. You've been selling all your best players, and
The
here
crown
you are.
jewels, yes, but we've got uh Lots of quality. We've got Dan James who's worth 25, or at least we
Oh, hang
bought him
on.
for
I
25
forgot.
million.
Hang on, one more. Didn't you sell Sinistera this past summer as well?
That was he was sort of quite early. That was,
Okay.
but we've still got enough quality. There's a lot of quality in terms of the championship. We are, without a shadow of a doubt, the most expensively assembled side, and in my opinion, the best squad. Uh, so there's no excuses. We've played 12 games. We've won six. Now, in the Premier League, that would be outstanding. This is not the Premier League. What Sunderland are doing is what we should be doing. They've won 9 out of 12, and we're far superior in terms of overall quality. It's almost reminding me of what happened last season. In a sense, we should be the front runners. Uh, there is going to be Burnley who at some stage are going to get their act together. Sunderland will be, in my opinion, the Ipswich that we keep on thinking they're going to fall by the wayside, but they won't. And then we'll probably finish third, and then we do nothing in the playoffs. And that's why for me, when you play well, finish the job off. And
I can just imagine Leeds. I think if Leeds finish in the playoffs this year, I don't think your heart's gonna be able to take it. I swear.
I mean, we to be honest, if we're finishing the playoffs, forget it. Just sort of say, right, we will concede whoever we're playing against because there's no point. It's just a waste of time. Let's just sort of move on
Yeah,
to next season.
yeah.
So
Let some other team go to Wembley instead. Yeah.
yeah, so I was bitterly disappointed, and again, it's because I know that you can't just isolate this game because I view it in the context of a whole season, and these are the points that we're losing out on, which will probably be costly come the end of the season. So it is what it is. But we're playing Waz's Plymouth on Saturday, so that should be entertaining.
He's probably gonna get quite a bit of abuse, I think, just because of his
He will
connections
do, yeah, yeah. He
connections
certainly
to Man
will do.
United. Yeah,
Yeah, he
exactly.
certainly will do. So that's for me to look forward to. But as always, a pleasure to speak to you, my friend. Uh, Drop your comments in because obviously it's been quite an eventful few days. So we'd love to hear from you about what your thoughts on Ten Hag are and the Liverpool Arsenal game. But on that note, I think I'll say see ya. It's quite dark outside, so I need to get some grub inside me as well. So have a nice evening. See you later.